right. Let's see if this is working. Yes, it is. Hang on, let me turn on live chat. Closed captions, public. Okay. Fine. Just trying to check if this is actually working. All right, we should be okay now. Let me just turn this down slightly to around there. Okay. Fine. I will see if this is actually... Okay. Just going to wait for at least one person to join, and then I'll start. Because I think most of the people watching this... Wa alaikum wassalam. Nice. One person's in. Brilliant. I think most people seeing this probably see it after it gets uploaded. But essentially, I wanted to do a live reaction to this because it is just that bad that it really needed one. So, in a nutshell, the Israeli ambassador to the United Kingdom was invited onto Sky News to pretty much say the most insane stuff imaginable about the recent conflict. And so, yeah, I wanted to do a live reaction because it was just... It's one of those things where it is so unfathomably evil, the stuff that comes out of her mouth, that it's... First of all, it's shocking this even got aired. And secondly, it's not one that is really deserving of a full breakdown. So, okay, let's give this a shot. Just wait for... Yeah, cool. Okay, let's give this a watch. We'll see how long I last before I just rage quit from watching this. And also, let me know if there's any audio issues as well.
Joined now by the Ambassador for Israel to the United Kingdom, Zippy Hotaveli. Hello, thank you for joining us on the programme this morning. What updates do you have for us, first of all, from Israel this morning?
So, as you know, Israel is now in the 10th day of this war that Hamas started in the horrible massacre of the 7th of October. Many Israelis are traumatized and shocked from the atrocities that the world have seen in the last few days. I've seen so many families devastated, destroyed.
So immediately what's interesting here is that for her, and I guess for Israel itself, whenever there is an outbreak of violence, violence always begins from the moment the Palestinians respond to them and attack. Like, history up to the 7th of October, as far as they are concerned, just categorically does not exist. They don't believe that anything happened before the 7th of October. For them, as soon as Hamas and the assortment of other militia groups from Gaza crossed the border into Israel, that is when the fighting actually started. All the history before that, up to that point, the apartheid, the blockade of Gaza, which has, by the way, been going on since 2006, the ethnic cleansing, which resulted in millions of Palestinians ending up in the Gaza Strip in the first place, an area which is just not made to support that sort of population at all. All of that just didn't happen. It's just Israel was unprovoked, was attacked completely unprovoked on the 7th of October, and nothing happened prior to that point. And so whenever an Israeli official is interviewed, that is where they will begin their sort of recollection of what happened. And by the way, anyone in the chat, just let me know. Yeah. You know what I mean? Just look at the settler violence this year, nearly 300 killed, exactly. Yeah, and that's the tragic thing as well, because what's happened with regards to this violence is, as you said, the violence in the West Bank, meaning the settler violence that is done by the Israelis there, has basically just ramped up this week. They've killed like 55 to 60 people in the space of this week in the West Bank. And that's just... And they just basically ignore that, and they ignore the ramping up of violence before this as well. And it's just absolutely insane. It is absolutely insane. So yeah. Also, let me know if there's any audio issues as well. Okay, let me carry on playing this.
They executed children in front of their parents. They fired on babies and beheaded them. They hurt pregnant women, raped young women. Those atrocities are the type that no Western leader can stand and say. Now,
before we go any further, with regards to the atrocities she mentions about the beheading of babies and the raping, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought that the Israeli government themselves said that they couldn't actually confirm whether or not that happened. Now, I don't know, it might have happened, and I'm not going to say it didn't, but from what I've seen, multiple media outlets, including CNN and BBC News, have had to retract that, and they said that the Israeli government couldn't confirm it. The numbers above are pre-October 7th, as you said, since it's gone nuts. They were killing. Yeah, exactly. So they will kill somebody in the West Bank, and then the people will have a funeral for the person that got murdered, and then the settlers will show up and start killing them too. Like they just don't stop at all. Yeah, so I don't know how much of what she's saying here can be confirmed, but it's interesting how, so she immediately starts, history begins on the 7th of October, and it begins with the atrocities Hamas committed then. Anything else before that point just didn't happen as far as she is aware.
Let's carry on. Those type of terror actions, brutally and barbarically committed to innocent Israelis, need to be answered by a Western coalition that we can see now. President Biden, Prime Minister Sunak, all the Western leaders, they all support Israel's right for self-defense, because you cannot imagine, British Prime Minister, that those type of atrocities will happen in his home in Manchester or in London, and the British Army won't respond.
Now, she is correct. If an event like that occurred in, say, Manchester or London, meaning what happened in Kfar Aza and the other Israeli settlements, then we would probably respond with overwhelming force. Now let's add a bit of context to that. Now let's suppose that actually this was committed in Manchester or London, and it was committed by a group of people who had come, so it's like a militia group, coming from a group of people who we had put into an open-air prison for 20 years, and we had them under apartheid occupation. So again, if you ignore all the context and everything leading up to that point, of course it sounds like literal hell on earth. But then when you consider what led up to that, was this really that surprising? And for the record, no, it doesn't make it okay. It's just like, what exactly do you think was going to happen? But anyway, let's carry on watching.
You're on the humanitarian crisis in Gaza this morning.
There is no humanitarian crisis because
there isn't.
There is no. Israel is in charge.
Okay, so obviously what she's saying here is a flat-out lie, that there is no humanitarian crisis in Gaza. 2,300 civilians are dead. 700 of those are children, almost all of which have died directly as a result of Israeli airstrikes or having been buried and crushed under the rubble. The claim that there is no humanitarian disaster, she's not even trying to be honest here. And what is frightening is just how callous and casual she is when she actually says that. Like, just, there is no humanitarian crisis. She just straight up says all those kids that are dead now as a result of Israeli airstrikes, they just don't exist. They're not real. And like, that is insane. That is really, really, really insane. Yes, Zaid, it will remain on the channel. The other ones which just went off were because I was testing them, but this will go up. I'll probably cut out the first couple minutes earlier, but yeah, it'll go up.
Of the safety of the Israelis. Hamas is in charge of the safety of the Palestinians. Hamas abused...
Okay, so that is also just not correct either. When you conduct a military operation, whether it be within your own borders or outside of your borders, you have an obligation and responsibility under international law for the civilians that you are about to bomb into scorched rubble. So yes, it is absolutely correct that the Palestinians living in Gaza are indeed the responsibility of Israel for the duration that Israel either maintains the blockade over them or is bombing them, and, well, or both, which is what they're doing now. So yes, she is again just wrong. Then again, the Israeli government does not believe they are accountable to international law, but they believe that they can do whatever they want with complete impunity. So yeah.
Every single support of the international community, and instead of taking care of his people, it created this underneath tunnel of terror, a manufacturing of rockets that their own main target is to hurt innocent Jews.
So this is a common talking point you'll hear from Israelis, which is, well, Hamas rules the Gaza Strip. Why were they building rockets instead of taking care of their people? So first and foremost, notice how they never go into specifics about this. Well, okay, I don't really know how much power Hamas actually has in the Gaza Strip. I don't particularly care either. But if you want to talk about that kind of dichotomy, what did America do during World War II? Well, during World War II, almost 50% of America's GDP went towards defense. And that was for a war taking place half a world away. Like, their homeland was not threatened at all. The United States of America, the country itself, apart from Pearl Harbor, the United States of America was not threatened, right? But they were fighting a war in the Pacific against the genocidal Japanese Empire and against the Nazis. And they put 50% of their GDP towards that. So now consider, what would the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip be putting their economic output towards when they are under a permanent blockade and are at war with a country that just bombs them with impunity all the time? There is no public infrastructure here to invest into. That gets bombed or cut off all the time. And this is what she's describing here is basically what every country would be doing. So this is such a stupid thing to say.
And this is the time that Hamas need to pay the price for its abuse, killing innocent Israelis, and now preventing from his own people to evacuate and to be safe.
So what she's basically saying here is, it's okay for Israel to essentially ethnically cleanse the Palestinians, because yes, telling an entire population of people living in a city, get out or we are going to annihilate you, that is ethnic cleansing. And so she's basically saying that that's not ethnic cleansing, or that's not bad. That's actually Israel trying to keep the Palestinians safe by telling them to go on a death march down south to the southern area of the Gaza Strip, an area the size of lower Manhattan, if any of you have been to New York. Telling them to go there, to an area with no infrastructure, no energy, not enough food and water. That's Israel trying and saying, if you don't go there, we're going to kill you all. That's actually them being merciful, according to her. And Hamas not allowing them to do that. Now, Hamas should allow them to do that. I don't know if they are or if they're not, or if they prevented them. I don't know what her proof is for that, but she's lied throughout the rest of this conversation, so I wouldn't just be surprised if that's not true either. Apparently they're the bad guys for that, but not Israel for actually being the one to attack them. It just gets insane the more and more you think about it.
He's worked with the international organizations to make sure all Palestinian civilians will be safe, and we are giving them the opportunity to go south.
Just remember, she's claiming that Israel has worked with the international community to make sure all the Palestinian civilians are safe. She is saying this whilst 700 kids have been killed in airstrikes this week alone. Like, just think about that for a minute. This is her view of working with them to keep the Palestinians safe. Like, there's not even an attempt to be honest here.
Sheltered places that they will be safe.
What places are those? What places are there where there is shelter, where they'd be safe? What are those places? That they don't exist. You won't let them into Israel, which would be a safe place for them to go. And Egypt won't let them in either, because they don't want to deal with the refugee crisis that comes about as a result of Israeli ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. So what places will they be safe that they can go to?
The children of Kfar Aza, the people of Sderot, were not given this opportunity to be safe. They weren't alarmed. They didn't get alert. They were slaughtered in their beds. So Israel is just targeting military targets, and we want the international community to make sure Hamas will bring back home all those kidnapped people, including British citizens, by the way. Yesterday, I got a phone call from Israeli citizens that said the mother was shot and the two teenager girls, 13 and 16, are kept hosted in Gaza, British citizens.
We've been showing...
God, where do we start with this? Where do we start? So the claim that Israel is specifically targeting military targets is, again, just a flat-out lie. We know with absolute certainty that it is a lie because, A, we can see that they are just levelling entire residential neighbourhoods, hospitals and schools with complete impunity. That's the first thing. And secondly, if the places they're bombing were actually Hamas bases and places where militants were, then Israel would have bombed them months or years ago. Why? Well, because Israel bombs Gaza with impunity and zero diplomatic repercussions all the time. So this idea that they all just suddenly turned into Hamas bases overnight, and Israel had no idea about this, and all these residential neighborhoods were actually just Hamas bases, and that's what they were targeting, is absurd. Like, these are not bases for militants. And also we have videos of, coming from Gaza, the people that are literally filming their houses getting destroyed. They are filming the convoys fleeing south and then getting bombed after Israel has told them that they'd be safe if they go south. Like, it's just insane. Hang on. Sorry, guys. Give me a second. Okay, right.
Pictures this morning that would illustrate that there is a humanitarian crisis in Gaza.
Can I ask you something?
Yeah.
Are you a mother?
Yes.
What would you think if your children would have been executed in front of your eyes? Would you expect your government to think about those Nazis committing those crimes and to say, wait a second, first of all, we need to protect the enemy, and then to protect my children?
So this, I think, is probably the single most insane part of this interview so far. So to put into perspective here, the interviewer just asked her, there's a humanitarian crisis in Gaza, basically saying, what are you going to do about this? And her response is to say that we don't need to care for the safety. Okay, first of all, she asks a rhetorical question, which is, what would you do if you as a mother watch your children getting killed? Well, I don't know. Why don't we ask the parents of the 700 children who you've just murdered in the past week? Why don't we ask them what they think when they saw this happening? And secondly, notice how she just described the Palestinians, collectively speaking, not Hamas, but the Palestinians collectively as Nazis and the enemy. Because the interviewer asked her about the safety, the humanitarian crisis that is currently facing the Palestinian people and their safety, and is there a responsibility over that safety? And the ambassador's response is to basically say that we don't need to worry about the safety of these Nazis, of the enemy, basically. Former PM Naftali Bennett went into a similar rage, and he ironically brought up the bombing of Dresden as if that justifies anything. Yeah, we'll get on to that. The thing is, I heard about this interview actually because I heard that she brings up the bombing of Dresden too. And we will, if she doesn't talk about, we'll bring it up anyway in a minute because that's a really, really dumb comparison he made. But yeah, it's insane. So Israel have killed 700 kids, and she is now basically saying that all the Palestinians, all those people who the interviewer wants to keep safe, are actually Nazis. She's pretty much justifying collective guilt and therefore collective punishment. Okay.
Your children come as priority to your prime minister.
So
do you know that?
We have been showing images this morning that illustrate that there is a humanitarian crisis in Gaza.
So blame Hamas and ask Hamas why they started those atrocities, walking around.
So you acknowledge that there is a humanitarian crisis?
I'm saying there is no. Israel is working.
So what do you think is happening?
What is happening?
Oh my God. Okay. So first of all, she claims that while Hamas is responsible for the Palestinians facing the humanitarian crisis because they attacked Israel first. So again, how is that any different from saying that, well, those Israeli civilians supposedly, quote unquote, got what they deserved because of, well, all of Israel's crimes against the Palestinians over the past 60 years. Like, again, this doesn't mean anything. And also notice how she contradicts herself. First, she said, "Oh, ask Hamas about why there's a humanitarian crisis." Then she just says, "Oh no, there isn't one." Unfortunately, the interview doesn't do a very good job of pushing back on this. But yeah, she's just saying stuff now.
There is a war in Gaza, a war that Hamas started by committing a horrible massacre on innocent Israelis. The world have seen that. Wait a second.
That are innocent civilians.
Just I want to say and give a little bit of a context. Those people created crimes that are worse than ISIS. When the Americans started this fight of ISIS, together with the coalition forces, over 100,000 civilians got caught in a crossfire.
Wait a second, what? 100,000 civilians were killed by the US when they fought ISIS. Hang on, I'm going to check that. Sorry, everyone. How many civilians died US air strikes? It's ISIS. According to the military's count, 1,417 civilians have died in airstrikes in the campaign against ISIS and Iraq and Syria. Since 2018 in Afghanistan, US air operations killed 180 civilians. So I assume that 1,417 figure does not include, obviously, the deaths that came about as a result of all those Syrians and Iraqis being displaced when Mosul and Raqqa got reduced to scorched rubble by the US Air Force. But this is about what? The civilians who were killed directly by USAF. Now, that's 1,417. That is, and in Israel, and that is presumably throughout 2014 and 2015, which is the main sort of focal point of the fighting between the coalition and ISIS. And then they defeated them in 2015 and then again in 2017. So that's that. And that resulted in what? 1,417 civilians being, yeah, there probably are more. You're completely right, Harris. There definitely are more deaths than that. That doesn't include all the civilians dead as a result of like displacement and starvation. Okay, so this is another one. US airstrikes in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Somalia, Yemen. Okay, so that's not Syria and Iraq. So, hang on. Dying ISIS. Hit in Pentagon. According to the military's count, that's 417 civilians. It is probably undercounting it. But if that number is anywhere near, like even if it's in the ballpark, even if it's say like 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times this figure, right? Bear in mind, Israel has just killed like what, 2,300 civilians in a single week, and this is what for that entire 2-year period. Like that's insane. And okay, yeah, well, I think we're going to come to the Dresden comparison soon in a minute as well. Hang on, let's see this.
To prevent that, Israel is better than any other army in the world.
And also, Warning somebody you're about to bomb their house before you bomb their house does not mean that it's okay to bomb their house. Like, I don't know where this idea has come from, that Israel is somehow moral because they tell the Palestinians, get out, before they go ahead and annihilate them. And also bear in mind two additional caveats here, which is A, they don't have a safe place to go, so they will be on death marches. And B, they continue bombing them even after they leave, as we saw earlier this week with the 70 people being killed in a convoy, and then like another 50 people being killed in the middle of like that refugee camp square, where they were told to flee to. That's insane.
We're giving them the opportunity to have a shelter. We're doing things that
What do you mean you're
other
giving them an opportunity to have a shelter? What shelters have you set up for them? You're not letting them in Israel. So where, and you haven't actually began the ground invasion officially yet. So where have you set up shelters for them?
An army did in the past.
Better than any other army in the world.
Can I tell you something?
Better than any other army in the world.
Yes, no army.
So where were they defending your people last Saturday?
We failed protecting the people of Israel, and this is why now we need to make sure Hamas won't be in our border. But I'm trying to say,
this again doesn't really make any sense because Hamas is out of their border now. They've already kicked them out. They're no longer in Israel proper. So what she really means to say is she doesn't want them to exist, but anyway, it's just a slip of the tongue.
We were for many years trying to build trust with the Palestinian people. We gave them the permission to work in our cities. We were trying to build a better future.
That is absolutely false. They were not trying to build a better future with the Palestinian people. Since when did a better future include things like setting up an apartheid-based permit regime in the West Bank? Hang on, let me just look this up. Permit regime. Yeah, since when did seeking better ties and building bridges with the Palestinians include setting up an apartheid regime there, a blockade of the Gaza Strip, bombing them every few years? In 2018, the Palestinians did their March of Return, a non-violent protest along the West Bank wall. Israeli soldiers shot and killed nearly 300 of them. That is not building bridges with them. If Israel wanted to actually build bridges with the Palestinians to make up what they have done, the financial resources required to do that would bankrupt the entire Israeli economy, which would be fantastic, by the way. But it just goes to demonstrate that this idea that they have tried to build ties with them is completely and utterly false. So she uses the example of how they are allowed to come and work in Israel. They get given work permits to come in. Israel benefits from that way more than the Palestinians do. Okay? So let's take this into account for a minute here. With a normal immigration system, say immigration to the United Kingdom, an immigrant comes in, right? And they're say in their 20s or maybe in their 30s or 40s. They come and settle down in the United Kingdom. They begin working and they begin paying taxes. And in exchange for working in the United Kingdom and contributing to the economy, they get to take advantage of things like the public services, public health, public infrastructure, and stuff like that. Now, with Israel, they have the West Bank under an apartheid regime, where they have different laws for the Jews living there, different laws for the Palestinians living there. So a few Palestinians can come in to Israel proper based on work permits, which can be revoked at any point, by the way. So they can come into Israel, they work for a bit, they get paid, then they go back. And bear in mind, they would get paid way less than what ordinary Israeli citizens would get, because obviously with them being Palestinians from the West Bank, they're willing to work for less money. It's a massive net benefit for Israel. So this idea that this is somehow some selfless act of charity that Israel has done by allowing the Palestinians in to work is just completely absurd.
Civilians that are losing their lives at the moment.
And now we lost so many people.
And you're saying that it's not a humanitarian crisis. How can you say that?
The humanitarian crisis at the moment is in Israel.
Are you saying they're subhuman?
There is no. Actually, they made the Jews subhuman. They treated them as subhuman. When you're taking babies, cutting them and tying them together and burning them to death, you're treating them less than an animal. Just the Nazis treated Jews like that.
And are Gazan civilians responsible for that?
the Hamas is responsible.
Exactly. And what about the collateral damage of the Gaza
Hamas
civilians?
is responsible.
So
to
again,
that.
just completely false under international law. No, they are not responsible for the damage that Israel does to Palestinian civilians. Israel is, because they have a responsibility when they go to war with them. But again, as she is saying here, she does not believe Israel has to comply with international law. She does not believe they have any responsibility over the collateral damage done to them. Oh my God, this is just painful to watch.
Well, because they're the one who preventing from their people to get a shelter. Israelis gave them the opportunity.
So the people responsible for the Palestinians going on their death marches south and being killed are not the people bombing their homes, bombing their hospitals, bombing their schools, not even trying to hit Hamas militants and military targets. Those people doing that aren't responsible. But it's the militant group there that's fighting Israel and allegedly preventing Palestinians from leaving those homes. Like, what is she talking about? How does that follow at all? Like, it's
to find a safe place in South Gaza.
A safe place in South Gaza. A safe place where, again, there's no shelter, there's no food, there's no water, there's no energy. They're going to die. That's a safe place for them, and we are being merciful because we've said if you don't go ahead and leave, we'll bomb you.
And they need to take it because this is as the best it can be. And I'm going back to the World Coalition fighting ISIS. So Mosul was a place where 100,000 civilians were killed. I don't want to go back to...
Mosul, 100,000 civilians, hang on. Wait, how many people killed in Mosul? I just want to check if she's right. An AP investigation found 133 mass graves left behind by... Oh, so this is done by ISIS. So she said 100,000. Yeah, so, okay. This is 9,000. Yeah, so Harris, I think you are right. That 1,417 figure was definitely massive undercut. So according to an AP investigation, yeah, 10 times higher than previously reported. So the Pentagon reported it as 1,400. AP investigation is saying 9,000. Where has she got the 100,000 figure from? I have no idea. I have no idea where she's got that. And bear in mind, again, this is over a period of like a 9-month battle. And Israel has already killed like nearly a fifth of that in just a week. That's insane.
Your history by targeting German cities. Dresden was a symbol of that.
Here we go, the Dresden comparison. Okay. Hang on.
Because you knew that this is the only way to beat the Nazis and make them surrender.
So the Dresden comparison is just completely incorrect, and I'll explain why. So Dresden in World War II was a major manufacturing center for the Nazis. And there were roughly, 25,000 civilians killed? Hang on. Bombing of Dresden in World War II. So there were around 25,000 civilians killed. And I think around most of the people who were killed during this were workers who were working in the factories inside Dresden manufacturing weapons for the Nazis. Now, the reason why this comparison doesn't work is because when the Allies were doing that, they were specifically targeting factories which were being used to manufacture those weapons. Now, for the record, there were definitely civilians who were killed who weren't doing anything. That's absolutely the case. But that's not at all what Israel is doing. Israel is not targeting Hamas manufactories and Hamas bases. They're just leveling entire residential neighborhoods at this point, and hospitals and schools. So, no, that is not at all even remotely comparable to what happened in Dresden in the slightest. Let me just see. Did I read that right? Because I remember. Two United States Air Force reports published in 1953 and 54 defended the operation as justified, which knows a major rail transport communication center housing 110 factories and 50,000 workers in support of the German war effort. Several researchers note that not all communication infrastructures and bridges were targeted, nor the extent of industrial areas which are located outside the city centre. Critics of bombings of the cultural landmark with strategic significance, indiscriminate area bombing not proportionate military gains, something that constitute a war crime. Now, first of all, putting aside the controversies surrounding this, it just doesn't work. It just does not make any sense. Like, okay, where are the big weapons manufacturers in Gaza? Where are they? When you have Gazans literally filming themselves in their homes as their houses and their streets are getting bombed, where are those factories that are producing all these rockets? And again, if these actually were factories producing rockets, as they were in Dresden, factories producing tanks and missiles and whatever else for the Nazis, then Israel would have bombed them months ago or years ago, because again, Israel bombs Gaza consistently with complete impunity and zero diplomatic repercussions. So again, no, this comparison does not make any sense, and it wouldn't be justified anyway, even if Dresden was a war crime.
This is the reality that Israel is facing: cruel, barbaric terror organization. This is Al-Qaeda. This is ISIS. This is similar to the Western coalition in the last few years. And the world is a better place without ISIS. The world will be a much better place without Hamas.
Tell me what the grand invasion is going to look like.
We are going to make sure that all Hamas capabilities will be destroyed. It means the underneath cities that Hamas has built with the great support of the international support.
But you've not been bombing those underground cities. You've not bombed a single one of them. None of those networks have been destroyed. You've just been bombing residential neighborhoods and people trying to escape. Like, what is she talking about? So if that's where Hamas is, and Hamas isn't in those like houses where people are getting killed, then what were the airstrikes doing? Apart from just basically forcing civilians to flee.
Using it and turning it, instead of facilities to the Palestinian people, turning it into a way of weaponizing and making sure that Israelis won't sleep safe in their homes.
So again, the comparison of why are they not providing facilities for the Palestinians? Okay, what facilities? Like what desalination plants? You need resources, you need energy for that. There are no energy resources in Gaza. They're dependent on Israel for it, because the Palestinians were again ethnically cleansed and forced to go into the Gaza Strip, where there were not enough resources in there to maintain a population, and so they were dependent on an outside help. This idea that the Gazan officials and Hamas, whoever else has power and had power there, just chose not to help the Palestinians. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't stand up to any scrutiny. And again, putting most of their economic output, the little economic output they had towards war, is exactly what every country at a state of war does, especially one facing existential annihilation. The way that Gaza has been for the past few decades. Sorry, just getting some warnings. We recommend use a stream bitrate of 4,500 kilobits per second. Yeah, okay, I'll sort that out later. Let me know if there are any video audio issues, everyone watching.
Firing rockets, thousands of rockets. Just the last week, 6,000 rockets were fired on Israeli cities. So this reality will be finished. We won't give them the capabilities or the political control in the Gaza Strip.
What will victory look like?
Victory will look like...
So again, she doesn't believe a word that's coming out of her mouth. It's impossible to just stop them doing that, because again, Hamas and the other militant groups are embedded within the civilian population. Many of these militants who joined Hamas may well just end up fleeing south as well. So how are you going to exterminate Hamas? Again, she doesn't believe that this is actually something that the Israeli government are going to do, or are even going to be able to do. Like, they can't do that. It's not possible, because, okay, suppose the Hamas leadership were in Gaza City. They're not, by the way. I know Ismail, whatever his name is, he's in Qatar. But suppose they were all in Gaza City, and suppose they were in that underground network of tunnels, and suppose the IDF just waltzed in and killed all of that leadership. What, do they think they would have destroyed Hamas? No. There were dozens of other, well, not dozens, but there's quite a few other militia groups there who would just take up power in the vacuum left behind. And also, you've got to bear in mind, there are 2 million people who went south as well. So what about all of them? Like, again, she doesn't believe anything she's saying here. Once they supposedly, quote unquote, destroy Hamas, which they won't do, by the way, they need Hamas to exist so they can justify continuing to bomb Gaza. Once they, quote unquote, destroy Hamas, they will just continue bombing their way south as well and forcing the Palestinian people to go and basically die, because they can't go to Egypt, they can't go to Israel. And they're obviously not going to be allowed back into the Gaza city. And even if they were going to be allowed to, they wouldn't be able to, because there wouldn't be anything there. They would have completely flattened it. So yeah, she doesn't believe a word that she's saying here, and what she's talking about here just doesn't even make any sense. The October 7th operation was a joint operation. Yes, exactly, it was. Yeah, it was a joint operation with lots of Palestinian groups. Yeah, with Hamas leading that. So exactly, so if Hamas somehow gets annihilated magically, because apparently there's just this organization of known people who are all going to be in those underground tunnels when the Israeli forces get there, there are going to be other groups to take up that mantle of like anti-settler, anti-colonial, anti-Israeli resistance. Excuse me.
I have a very good vision. I will quote one of the citizens of Be'eri, a community in the south of Israel that lost almost 80% of its people, and some of them are kept hostage in Gaza. So he said, I want to see the sea from my window. He wants to see peace and quiet from his window. He doesn't want terrorists on his border. This is how peace will look like. No terror organization will be sitting in our border.
Does that mean that Israel will occupy Gaza?
I'm not saying, I'm not speaking about occupation, because from 2005 we left Gaza.
So again, this isn't actually true either. As noted by the United Nations and countless human rights organizations such as HRW, Amnesty International, B'Tselem, I don't know how you pronounce them, Israel's sort of disengagement from Gaza was in name only, because again, they maintained a blockade. They bomb it with impunity whenever the hell they want. They maintain complete control of everything that goes in and goes out from the north, east, and de facto the west as well from the sea. The only bit they don't control is in Egypt, which Egypt doesn't want to let Palestinians in because they don't want a massive refugee crisis. So yeah, again, this disengagement and non-occupation is just a flat-out lie. Yeah.
Make sure that whoever controls Gaza won't have even one terrorist alive.
So, again, this is impossible. This isn't possible to you. You can't make it so that the Palestinian population doesn't have any more terrorists. Well, for two reasons. First of all, again, the militant groups are embedded within the civilian population. Civilians join those militant groups because they believe they have no other option. They know Israel is just going to starve them to death and maintain the blockade, so they inevitably go ahead and join these groups. You can't just make them not exist without just ethnically cleansing the Palestinians. So that's basically what she's saying that she wants to see happen, because that's the only way you can just eradicate them entirely. There is, of course, a much easier way to get rid of the terrorist groups, which is for Israel to stop the blockade of Gaza, lift the illegal occupation of the West Bank, lift the apartheid regime, pull back all the illegal settlers and settlements that are there, begin immediate negotiations for a permanent, long-standing peace. Again, there is a way that they can get rid of all that terrorism, but they won't do that because they want that terrorism there so that they can justify ethnic cleansing. And that's kind of the tragedy of it all.
Gaza. We won't let this terror infrastructure.
Who do you want to control Gaza?
People,
Who do you want?
People that want peace.
Do you have people in mind?
I think this is time for war. This is the war against Hamas is so serious. The fact that they built so many infrastructure that are based in schools, hospitals, they're using all the civilian facilities in order to fight back Israel. This is exactly.
So again, when she talks about wanting peace, as she admits it, that's just a complete and utter lie. She does not believe in like sort of making a long-standing peace. As she just said here, this is the time for war, and it's going to continue being the time for war until all the Palestinians are gone. Because again, you can't ever just eradicate the militant groups. That's not something you can do. So again, the war will just continue until, as far as she's concerned, all the Palestinians are either dead or gone. Yeah, it's not something that's going to work. And again, the hospitals and schools, again, that's just not true. Because if they knew where Hamas had their military bases, then again, they would have bombed them before. They would have bombed them months ago or years ago, because they do that all the time. They bomb civilian areas with impunity. They bomb places they claim are Hamas bases. So why wouldn't they have bombed those if they were in fact Hamas bases?
Complexity of this war, and we need to win it.
How will you
Please
be sure,
invite me.
How will you be sure
weeks from now and ask me
you
who
can
will
come on every
control
week
Gaza.
if you like, Madam Ambassador. How will you make sure that you don't create a vacuum?
There is no vacuum. We've just seen it. When the PLO lost the election, Hamas took over. So
that was in 2006. And as we know, as we've just seen, it's like the Israeli intelligence and security apparatus is so bad that even after the 7th of October attack happened, they still aren't aware that Hamas aren't the only ones in there. There is no power vacuum because 20 or like 17, 18 years ago, Hamas took over the Gaza Strip after they won an election and then never held an election again. Oh, come on. Seriously? All right.
A vacuum. But we need to know that no terror organization can flourish on our border, because our children will never be safe again if we will have another terror organization on our border. And every Israeli now, and we're all united, and the spirit in Israel. I just came back from Israel because I came with Foreign Secretary Cleverly. He came to show solidarity with the Israelis. And I saw the spirit. I was in the south. I saw people that their house still have spots of bloods in their living room, but their spirit is high because they know that never in the past we had such a clear-cut war of good versus evil.
It's amazing to me just how gleeful she is about this. Like, you know just how happy she is when she talks about how they have an excuse now to just bomb the shit out of Gaza. Like, she doesn't care about the people who are killed on either side. She just wants an excuse to kill Palestinians.
That are slaughtering babies versus people that are protecting their children in a shelter. Everyone saw the Israeli parents protecting the children in the shelters, and everyone saw the horrific footages of those beheaded babies, these horrors that created by Hamas terrorists. So this is such a clear-cut war.
You want to eliminate Hamas entirely. What do you suggest about people like Ismail Haniyeh, who is in Qatar at the moment? What should happen to people like him?
Well, I think the Prime Minister and the Chief of Staff made it clear. Everyone that are involved with Hamas terrorism, they have a death sentence.
Does that include him?
I'm not giving you the list of the names.
What a coward. I mean, of course it would, but she can't give a list of names, because if she said Ismail Haniyeh, then she has no way of killing him. They have no way of killing the Hamas leadership because they're not in the damn country. So she'd have to admit that this is just a punitive war against Palestinians and not one that's actually going to take out the Hamas leadership. And it's, I'm not giving you names. She's given you the name. She has given you the name. So what do you mean by that? One would think they would know better, given the rise of Palestinian militant groups in the West Bank, such as the Jenin Brigade, all part due to the inability of the PA to defend Palestinians. Yeah, exactly. And so, yeah, they've begun arresting hundreds of people in the West Bank over the past week as well. And they have, yes, they killed like 55, wounded another 1,000 settlers, that is. And we know for a fact that the people that they've been arresting, were not actual militants. And the reason why we know they weren't actual militants is because if they were, then Israel would have arrested them before. Because again, they carry out arrests and raids in the West Bank with complete impunity and zero diplomatic repercussions. So yeah, exactly. One would think they would know better. They should.
But you said everybody.
I'm saying everybody who's involved.
He's a Hamas leader.
I said everyone who's involved with terrorism will have to pay the price.
Does that include Ismail Haniyeh?
Do I look like the Chief of Staff of the Israeli IDF?
No, but you are representing the Israeli government today.
I need to tell you what are the aims. I don't need to get into military tactics, but I'm speaking clearly. There won't be left any capabilities to kill innocent children in Israel, because I think the world knows, and everyone who's watching this show knows, that what happened at the 7th of October, this horrific massacre, this is something make every parent not to sleep at night. And I'm a mother. I'm checking 3 times at night how my children are doing, because we're all
Have you guys seen, and I was talking to my friend about this earlier, you guys seen that film, that Jordan Peele film Get Out? And there's that scene towards the end of the film where his psycho girlfriend, after like trying to like subdue and torture him, is talking to his friend on the phone, and she is talking with the most sympathetic, concerned and distraught voice imaginable, and her eyes are just dead. They're just visibly dead, and like she just effortlessly switches between the two. That's basically this ambassador. Like, she's saying the most psychopathic stuff imaginable, but when she says it, she makes a conscious effort to sound as conscionable and afraid and concerned as possible. And it's just amazing to see how two-faced she is.
From the idea the terrorists walked into our bedrooms and killed brutally our children.
President Biden says that a path to a Palestine state must remain open.
I would say President Biden was very clear also about our right and our duty to fight this war against Hamas.
That has nothing to do with what she just said. Like, not even a little bit.
This is not the time to discuss future solutions, because at the moment, we first of all need to be safe and we need to defend our children. And the Palestinian leadership at the moment supports Hamas. This is what we've seen. I mean, the fact there were no election in the Palestinian authorities because the majority of Palestinians in the West Bank support Hamas. So we don't want to see the same reality.
So a two-state solution on hold for now?
The only solution that is at
Didn't
the moment
recent polling show that the Gaza Strip would prefer the PA? Maybe that's wrong. But I read somewhere that recent polling suggested they would rather have the PA in charge there. I don't know about the West Bank, though. The West Bank probably would prefer Hamas because the PA there is disgustingly corrupt. They are basically Israeli vassals at the moment. And it's like, yeah, I wonder why people in the West Bank would prefer Hamas to the PA when you literally have them under apartheid. Of course they're going to support more radical groups. Like, what did you think was going to happen?
Of the children of Israel. You don't speak about peace with Germany when the Germans are attacking all Western Europe. This is the reality we're in.
So again, she fails to once again distinguish between Hamas and the Palestinians because she believes and she knows this is not a war against Hamas. This is a war against Palestine. This is a war against the people living in Gaza and the people living in the West Bank, as she's just said. She doesn't actually care about Hamas. And we know this because she consistently draws comparisons between the Palestinians living in Gaza and the West Bank and the Germans who lived under the Nazis.
Churchill in his moment when all Europe surrounded and he had to stand still and to say, no, this is a pure evil. First of all, we need to defeat the pure evil, and then in the future, we need to speak about future peace. Chamberlain and Churchill were the two paths that Britain had during the Second World War. Everyone knows how Chamberlain's attempts for peace were failed, and sometimes you need to...
Yeah, so again, the comparison between Britain and Israel here, Britain in World War II and Israel today, doesn't really work because, in case she's forgetting, Britain didn't have Germany under a permanent occupation and apartheid in the 1930s. So again, this consistent comparison to, oh, they're noble allies in World War II. Oh, you guys, you fought the Germans and then you made peace with them. It's just not true at all. It does not. There is no comparison here to be made. You have them under permanent military occupation and under an illegal blockade. You are consistently seeking ways to evict them and make their lives absolute hell. The only reason they are in the Gaza Strip is because they were ethnically cleansed. There is no comparison between them and the Germans here at all. The Germans embraced fascism over a period of like a decade or so. Like, their country was not under permanent military occupation. The only way you could possibly fault the Allies there is like what? Taking away territory that was part of the German Empire in after World War One, like giving Poland their own state and giving Alsace back to France. Like, apparently, like that's the only comparison you can make here, which doesn't even make any sense because obviously those weren't like those were places that were occupied by the German Empire beforehand. So again, this comparison between the Palestinians and Nazi Germany just doesn't bloody work at all.
Evil. And I think this is the moment where we're fighting pure evil. And the Americans know. This is why they're projecting. I want to say a word for Gaza, for Mother's Gaza this morning. Keep yourself safe. Don't listen.
How do they do that?
Go south. We have shelters. We have shelters. I'm speaking from mother to mother. Don't support those atrocities, killing innocent babies. This is the...
that's so kind of you. Please, yeah, go to take your children and go south. Go to shelters that don't exist. Go and find safety where there is shelter and food and water, which again doesn't exist. Just hope to God you don't get bombed by an airstrike like the 70 innocent civilians earlier this week who were killed by Israel for the crime of heading south and actually listening to the Israeli army's commands. It's just absolutely ridiculous.
Time that mothers...
So, in case you guys weren't familiar with who Tsipi Hotovely is, I butchered her pronunciation there, I don't actually care. In 2013, Hotovely rejected Palestinian statehood aspirations, supporting a greater Israel spanning over the entire land of current Israel, along with the Palestinian territories. She later reiterated her position in a speech to Israeli diplomats on the 22nd of May 2015, rejecting criticism from the international community regarding the West Bank's settlement policies and saying that Israel tried too hard to appease the world and must stand up for itself. She said, "We need to return to the basic truth of our rights to this country." And she added, "This land is ours. All of it is ours. We did not come here to apologize for that." So she's openly, explicitly, unequivocally embraced settler colonial ideology in the past. This is the person that the UK has as their ambassador from Israel. And she makes no attempt to apologize for that. And to be honest, I actually appreciate that kind of honesty. But it's so pathetic how she plays the victim, the concerned, oh, I'm just a mother who has, I sympathize with all the other mums who have watched their children die. No, you don't. You are absolutely fine doing this to Palestinian mothers and children. Like, you are absolutely fine denying them their right to live in the land that they have inhabited for centuries. You are absolutely fine in ethnically cleansing them. She also stated that we will make every effort to achieve global recognition for West Bank settlements, as well as asserting Israel owes no apologies for its policies in the Holy Land towards the Palestinians. And now the chickens came home to roost on the 7th of October. It is basically, that is what happened here, at least following her logic. She justified her position. She referenced religious texts to back her belief that the Israeli-occupied West Bank belongs to the Jewish people. That's insane. In October 2015, an interview with the Knesset channel, Hotovely said, "It is my dream to see the Israeli flag flying on the Temple Mount. I think it's the center of Israeli sovereignty, the capital of Israel, the holiest place for Jewish people. Despite the government's insistence, it has no intention of changing the status quo at the site." Alongside fellow politician Avraham, I'm not going to pronounce that name. She's one of the most prominent Jewish politicians. I don't care. American Jews don't understand the complexities. Most Jews don't have children serving as soldiers. So this is how she responds to Jews who criticize her, basically, like Jews in America and in Britain. She basically says, "Oh, they don't understand what it's like to have children serving as soldiers. The only reason you have children serving as soldiers is because you're engaged in a perpetual war against another population. Of course they don't understand that, because they're not the ones currently doing that. You are." Criticised the Board of Deputies of British Jews. Following the publication of the board's manifesto, which noted it was forward to a solution, she complained they had not consulted Israel's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, our ambassador, or any other political authority before publication. Also saying an organisation supporting the establishment of the Palestinian state is working against Israeli interests. What could those interests be? Could they be the complete and utter annihilation of Palestinian aspirations for self-determination and the complete settlement and colonisation of those peoples and lands? Several senior members of the British community criticised her appointment as ambassador to the United Kingdom, mainly because of her ultra right-wing opinions, including Melanie Phillips, Jenny Fraser. Laura Jana Klausner and Lord Beecham, who stated the appointment of an ultra-right-wing ambassador, whilst typical of the present government of Israel, will do nothing to win friends in the UK or indeed any other reasonable country. Yep, they're correct. The British Jewish community being unfathomably based as usual. Calling for the UK government to reject her nomination as ambassador received hundreds of signatures. At her first event as ambassador with the Board of Deputies, Hotovely described the Nakba as an Arab lie. She had earlier sponsored the Knesset groups deemed to be racist who are opposed to mixed marriages. She favours a one-state solution that withholds citizenship from the West Bank Palestinians. So, this is an individual who is a genocide denier, wants extreme anti-miscegenation laws, and also openly supports apartheid, because obviously a one-state solution where the Palestinians don't have citizenship is the most explicit and overt form of apartheid you can possibly have. Because now when they criticize now, they use the excuse of, oh well, the Palestinians in the West Bank aren't technically part of Israel, so you can't accuse us of apartheid. Obviously, that's a lie, because they're still under military occupation. They can still be raided. Their movement is still completely restricted. They are still subject to different laws to the Israeli settlers. They can still be shot by Israeli settlers with no consequences. But yeah, this is the kind of thing that she favors, and she is absolutely gobsmacked that they retaliated in this manner. Yeah, so these are the kind of actual monsters we are dealing with. Most Gazans are descendants of refugees from the 1948 Nakba. Exactly. But you see, the thing is, by denying that the Nakba happened, and by basically saying that it's an Arab lie, it basically means that the people in the Gaza Strip now, they're not there by any fault of the Israelis. And it essentially allows her to sever that history, that history of ethnic cleansing, how they ended up in Gaza in the first place, completely sever it from the present day. And so once again, it links back to what we said earlier about how for Israelis and for the Israeli government and for their officials and the military and all their institutions, for them, history begins on the 7th of October, 2023, or basically whenever Palestine retaliate against them. Yeah. So, Israeli diplomats, a lot of them are just straight up unapologetically fascist. There's no doubt about it. Israel Hamas will live. Let's see what's going on in Gaza. 24 hours from catastrophe. Sirens in Jerusalem. Multiple organization warns there are only 24 hours of water, electricity, and fuel left in the besieged Gaza Strip as Israeli bombardment continues. Yeah, so what happened to all those safe shelters where all the Palestinians can go to? Sirens blare in Jerusalem. Hamas claims firing rockets towards Israel. Israel and Hamas both deny reports of ceasefire in southern Gaza. Israel's deployed thousands of troops, tanks, soon begin a ground invasion. Gaza doctors fight to remain.
Every time we call them, profound, tragic new reports from family being killed, really horrific stories.
Dr. Ghassan Abu Sitta.
I don't know if I can just play that without getting a copyright strike, but yeah. Surgeon Al-Shifa Hospital Director General, Without Borders. It's amazing that they actually believe their lies when they say that, oh, we are putting Gaza under a blockade to fight Hamas. Like, no, you're not putting it under a blockade to fight Hamas. Hamas are like, what? Less than 8% of the Palestinian population, and they are embedded within the civilian population. You're not going to hurt Hamas by cutting off the water. You're just going to hurt the Palestinians. And again, her response to that, if you recall, was, oh, we don't care about the safety of the enemy, of those Nazis, talking about the Palestinians. So it goes to really show just how they actually view those people. So it's actually risen now. So it wasn't 2,300 civilians. It's now 2,800 dead and nearly 11,000 wounded. Wow. And honestly, ultimate respect as well to the Palestinians in the West Bank who are basically protesting. And also, they know for a fact that any of the people who actually appear, any of the protesters who appear like on camera and in the media, as they do here, are all at risk now because Israel can basically just raid their houses with impunity. It should be noted Israel doesn't want a one-state solution with equal rights. Exactly, yeah. So I forgot to mention that. Israel views the existence of the Palestinian people as an existential demographic threat to their very existence. Israel cannot exist as a Jewish majority state if the Palestinian people there are given equal rights under a one-state solution, because it now means that they won't be a majority anymore. And so if they're not a majority, then it just means that, well, the Palestinians are now, they get equal rights, equal representation. And so, yeah, they view them as an existential threat, pretty much. By finding refuge in Gaza's oldest church. Wow. Knesset session halted them in silence. Maybe you shouldn't have moved the capital to Jerusalem then. Majority of Americans want US to help Palestinians flee. According to a Reuters 2-day poll, bipartisan majority. Support for Israel is higher than it was in the survey conducted in 2014 when Israeli forces clashed with Hamas. Yeah. I don't think that there's ever going to be a time where where Americans don't support Israel. Because I feel like American history is just too heavily paralleled by Israeli history in terms of the stuff they've done both for each other and the similarities in what they've done to their native populations for the US to ever give up support for Israel. I think the only sort of benefit that could emerge, or the only sort of change, that could happen in the long term is if this has torpedoed normalization of relations between Israel and its Arab neighbors, it basically means that when those Arab countries do develop, Israel is going to be in, well, a lot of trouble. Okay, I've got work to do. Thank you all for watching. I will probably upload this soon, inshallah. So, yeah, assalamu alaikum.